Welcome to Cultivating Courage, a podcast exploring fear, courage, and stepping into a life filled with purpose, connection, and love. In this week's episode, Matt and I are chatting about our takeaways from participating in the Landmark Forum weekend. We're chatting about living in stories that we've created and giving yourself the gift of freedom. Matt also promises that I'll sing if you guys vote. So you check it out. Find the rules. Listen in. It's amazing. You'll love it. Here we go. It's time. Maybe now. Welcome to another episode of Cultivating Courage. I'm your host, Kristen Robinson. And in this episode, we're back to just me and Matt.
Yeah, here we are.
Just the two of us.
I'm not going to start singing.
Fine.
But I was actually thinking it would be awesome. Do you do karaoke?
When I'm forced to, yes.
I don't know why, but I had this idea walking over here that I'm like, at some point I need to ask Kristen to just sing a song for the listeners. Just like seriously sing for us.
That's hilarious.
I know,
What
wouldn't
made
that be
you
so
think
cool?
of that?
I have no idea. But seriously, I was
Because
thinking
I'm
on the
always
way
just
over
like
here.
singing random little bits of songs.
No, I don't know why. I thought it would just be entertaining.
Interesting.
Maybe entertaining and like out of your comfort zone.
Well, it would 100% be out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, like totally vulnerable.
I used to sing in church, and I've sang at a couple of weddings. So it's not that I can't sing. Apparently, I'm okay at it.
What would you think you could sound best at?
But like stage fright is real for me.
Yeah,
When it comes
totally.
to singing, talking, whatever. Singing, no thank you.
I'll sing if you sing.
How funny. Not today.
I'm going to keep pushing it. Are you guys with me? Let's keep pushing her to sing. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably like...
We'll take song requests in the comments.
Yes, if someone suggests a song, the day that someone suggests a song in the comments,
Yep.
I will
Okay,
sing.
that they suggest.
I might not
somebody's gotta
necessarily
suggest
sing
a
that song.
And it's got to get, can it
I
get
might not-
liked? Comments for what? YouTube? You can like comments there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
you can...
YouTube comments.
YouTube
Put
comments.
a song in, and the one with the most votes is going to be sung by Kristen on an episode.
Oh, that's funny. I was just thinking then I would sing. If someone suggested a song, then I would sing, not necessarily that song.
Oh, no, that's the whole point.
But
That's the
I
fun of
like-
it. She will
yeah.
sing the song suggested by you. Get on there right now. Go to YouTube. Suggest a song. Like other people's suggestions. All four of you. Mom.
Mom,
Suggest a song.
Dad.
Make it a church hymn. No, that'd be... What,
Oh, that's... Yeah, sure.
that's
It
what
could
you
be
could
a church
do.
hymn.
Or like a Prince song. Eminem. I'd like to hear you do Eminem.
I do love Eminem.
Yeah.
We could do the Rihanna and Eminem like song. You could be Eminem and I'll be Rihanna.
Let's see. Which one is that?
That's
Monster?
where he talks about... Oh, that's a
Rihanna
good one.
with the
Oh,
monster.
that's a good one. I was thinking of the Burn the House Down one.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, either one.
Okay, but you guys choose. If it's up to me, I'm singing like Jack Johnson.
Oh, like
Or-
Bubble Toes.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe Sting.
Oh.
Fields of Gold.
Hold on, Sting or the Police?
Sting.
Okay.
The Police is too high.
You just hit that so well, though.
No, I did not, dude. I was like,
That wasn't... You're not even warmed up.
no,
Imagine.
that was just right out of the blue.
Imagine what you could do
Dang.
if you were really warmed up.
Have we ever talked about that I'm an actor?
On the podcast?
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about it in like your intros sometimes, but we've never really talked about how you got into it,
Right.
what you enjoy about it. We've never like really dived into it.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to.
Oh,
But
okay.
I do. I mean, we can. But sometimes when people ask, like, do you do musical theater? And I have done musical theater, but I'm got a pretty low voice, so there's not a lot of great roles for basses in musical theater. But I was Fagin in Oliver, which was really fun. And he's
Yeah.
got a couple of solos.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've always said every time I go and see a musical, I have like this, I don't know how to describe the feeling, but every time I go, I always just feel like, man, I wish I would have thought when I was younger that this could be something for me. Like I've always thought like I would love for that to be my job. Now I don't see it as, now I don't feel the same way. I just get just absolute pleasure from going to musicals and like seeing that.
You just told
But
me
like,
that when you go see musicals, you wish you had done musicals.
well, yeah, but not like now. I don't have that strong urging now.
Because you suppressed it and killed it.
I killed my dream. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I killed the dream I didn't
You
even know I
dreamed the
had. I dreamed the dream. Yeah.
Okay, well, just FYI, there are places in which people like you could do a musical and have a blast.
Yes, I suspect that's true. I'm not sure I have the capacity currently to add that to my schedule.
Come on. Okay, but I'm going to hold it as something Kristen once said that she might have loved doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it would be super fun. And I
is.
I love the idea of that. So I feel like,
if you go far enough outside of a big city like Chicago, you will find a theater that would hire you.
yeah, probably the one in my hometown.
Yeah, probably.
Well,
but you got to start somewhere.
Yeah,
and I've known people that started doing community theater and now are like very successful professional actors. So they started at late ages. It's definitely possible.
Well, it's not really something. So my life kind of like vision is to never be tied down and to constantly be traveling. Yeah. So the idea of doing theater now doesn't really appeal to me. Maybe like one time.
Yes.
But
you can do a show and a show commitment, especially community theater. It's like 2 months.
Yeah. Like the level of commitment for that would be okay. But I wouldn't want it to be my career at this point because I don't want to be.
Reasons, considerations.
No, just honesty and truth, I think.
I choose not to.
Well, because I want to be able to like pick up and go.
Totally. I'm not saying it's not the truth. I'm saying that if it's at the reason we were just talking about, that we might actually explain this conversation to you guys in a minute.
We might actually talk about something useful at some point on this
this
episode.
Is super useful. I'm getting, you're getting a lot out of this. Yeah, they're getting a lot out of it.
Oh,
they just told me.
Good. They told you?
Yep. We didn't start our timer, by the way. I have no idea what time we're at.
I know.
I'm going to start it now.
6:30.
Okay, that's good. Let's see. What do we want to talk about?
Well, I think we can talk about considerations. We can talk about reasons.
Yes.
We can talk about where those concepts came from for the two of us.
Yeah.
How they're showing up in our lives. How they might be showing up for our audiences.
Yes.
Lives.
Yeah. Just to give you guys a little bit of background, a couple months ago, I did the Landmark Forum. You can go to landmarkworldwide.com.
I really don't know what the website is.
I think that's the website.
Yeah.
Anyways, Landmark Forum is a thing that's been around for decades. It's like a personal empowerment 3-day seminar.
Yep.
That is really, really, really wonderfully powerful. And they introduce some really cool distinctions, and it's kind of hard to describe. We'll probably describe a little bit on our episode because we've each now done it over the last couple of months. And it's just a really, really special weekend. And the forum in particular, they have 2 big weekends. There's the Landmark Forum and then their advanced course.
Yes.
And the theme of the Landmark Forum is getting your past out of your future. Generally, there's a lot of different stuff they look at, but that's the overall theme, is actually getting really, really complete.
Yeah.
And okay with everything that's happened in your life so that you're like a blank slate.
Yes.
That can then create your future.
However.
From nothing.
Yes.
Instead of from all of your past difficulties, circumstances, challenges.
Stories that you don't even know you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we each did that, and I recommend it. All in all, I think most people I know, I would love to see them do that weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree.
And it's, all things considered, very inexpensive, and they do it all over the world, and particularly all over the U.S. So there's lots of options to look up and check out the forum. Yeah. In fact, I think I might, with many of my clients,
start recommending it.
Yeah. I think they'll get more out of my coaching if they've done
Absolutely. I would say 100% that if you do this, you have a framework for then to go into coaching more focused and more thoughtful about what it is. And you know, instead of slowly kind of like getting down the path, you're already halfway down the path to be like, okay, now I know. I've got these things happening and this is what I want to focus on. You're just more, I think it just provides some clarity around stuff to make coaching more effective right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what I want to know is, what did you take from doing the forum that was powerful for your own life and that might also be powerful for listeners to hear about?
So for me, I took 2 big things away. And it'll be interesting to hear your big things, because I think the beauty of the forum is that everybody gets something and it's probably not the same thing, you know, because there's so much information that's covered. And like, I walked away with 2 big things, but they cover a gajillion things.
Yeah.
So my 2 big things was the concept and the idea of stories. And some of the stories are pretty easy for me to identify, like, and some I didn't even realize that I was living in this story until I did the forum and they explained the concept. So the concept of a story is basically something happened and you didn't like it. And so you created this story, whether consciously or subconsciously, created this story to try and prevent that thing from ever happening again. And then a lot of times what happens is we just start living in this story instead of clarifying, like, this thing happened. This thing happened. That's all.
So what are some examples of that?
So for me with the stories, I had one really big one that I'd been living in probably since I was, I don't know, born practically. And I didn't realize, I don't think until I did the forum, like how impacted I was by it. I mean, when I was explaining stories, and I think I kind of mentioned offhand, like stories you don't even know you're living in. Like this was one of those. So when I was younger, whenever my dad would get upset, and now as an adult, right, I can see it a little bit differently, but whenever he got upset, he would just withdraw from the family. And, like, that's all that happened. He withdrew from the family. But I think
what you made it mean.
Exactly. What I made it mean in the story I created was that if I say the right thing, or I stay quiet, or I'm always agreeable and don't rock the boat, and I'm always on my like best behavior, then maybe I can make sure that doesn't happen. Like, just be perfect. Mm-hmm. And even if you don't agree, don't say that. Just be quiet, be good. And I had when I had that realization, it was like my mind was like blown open, because it was like, holy cow, I literally my entire life have been living my life as like, just be the good girl. Be the good girl, be agreeable, like don't disagree with people, just let them have their opinion. You don't have to say that you don't agree. And there are things that I didn't do in my life because I was afraid that it might upset somebody. Mm-hmm. And it's like crazy that this basically, like my, let's say 6-year-old self was holding my life hostage. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea, like no idea. I just lived in that story that I needed to be a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know that I was living in that story. Mm-hmm. Like, it's nuts. And so the biggest thing, though, I think, is that that's my story. Mm-hmm. like, that's my story that I created. I'm responsible for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What happened is the thing that happened. And then I created the story around it. You know, I was saying as an adult, like I have a slightly different perspective now. And like my dad worked his butt off, you know, like my parents let us do everything. You know, we were all involved in sports, extracurriculars, like we had piano lessons. I took gymnastics, you know, like, and my dad's a farmer. Like, that's amazing. So I imagine he was probably stressed out a lot.
You look great.
Ugly cry. And as an adult, I can see that.
Yeah.
But the 6-year-old me, I just wanted to play and have fun. And I didn't understand why Dad wasn't talking to us at the kitchen table during dinner. But that ultimately, I think the freedom. Oh, sorry, guys. Ultimately, I think the freedom in the concept of stories is A, the realization, but B, you're freeing everyone from that story. Like, you're taking responsibility, and that frees you and anyone else that was part of that story to live how they want to live and to be fully expressed. And, you know, now I don't know that I'm like out there saying everything I think, because I think there's a balance. Still, there's a balance, but just the realization that like I can clarify, like, here's the thing that happened. And this is the story I've created around that. And it could be anything for anybody.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just, I mean, I'm sure most people can look back to their childhood and probably see some stories that their 6-year-old self created that that as an adult they continue to live in. But I mean, it happens as adults too. Things happen and we create meaning around them.
It's
and
just automatic.
Our meaning.
Yeah, exactly. And we can own it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it gets to be a real gift is, well, when you can start to separate it, right? And see like, oh, that's just what happened. All the things I made it mean.
Exactly.
I made it mean.
And
they don't necessarily mean that.
Yeah. They don't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah.
Like that was a huge thing that I took from the forum too.
Yeah.
Is like anything that I think means something, I made it mean that.
Yeah. And so seeing that like, oh, this kind of thing happened when I was a kid. I made it mean all these things. Getting to really see that for the first time. What's the result for you now of having seen that?
I think just a level of like newfound freedom of self-expression. It certainly didn't change overnight where I'm like, oh yeah, nothing means anything. And so I'm just going to say the things I want to say. Like it's so easy. It's not like that. But I think that I'm just so much more aware of being able to hold my truths and express my truths with less consideration around what other people might make them mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of this. Have we talked about training fleas before on the
No.
podcast? Okay. I love this. I think this is true. I've seen a video on YouTube.
Oh, well, then it must be
But
true.
it's an analogy. But
I feel like this might be the first episode where we like make James edit a video of fleas on
Into
YouTube
this?
into
Yeah.
it.
Okay, maybe.
I'll put it
You
right
can
here.
Google it. But I think it's probably accurate. So it's called training fleas. And the idea is basically fleas naturally have like ridiculously crazy jumping ability. And that's how they get from carrier to carrier. So pet to pet or hair to hair or whatever. All my fleas are jumping around right now.
Fantastic. Better fleas than bed bugs.
Yeah, really. So that's crazy. It's something like the equivalent of a human jumping to the top of the Empire State Building.
Oh my gosh.
Like that's how crazy their leaping ability is relative to their size.
Right.
So what training fleas is you put them in a jar and then you put a lid on the jar.
And so they think they can only jump that high.
They bounce into it a
Yeah.
few times. And eventually they learn that that's as far as they can jump.
Yeah.
And when you remove the lid, they will not leave the jar.
Wow.
They've trained that that's as far as they can jump. And their progeny also think that. They'll reproduce
because
within
they've
the
never
jar
seen
and only jump
they've
that
only
high.
seen the other fleas jump that high.
Yeah, or
makes
however
total
the hell
sense.
fleas
Oh my
communicate
gosh,
that.
that's so like humans.
Yes.
Holy cow.
We're all living in a jar.
Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah.
Because there are cultural lids
Yep.
that say this is what is okay or possible for a human to do. And we're all just jumping in this. And then there's little individual lids we put on over time, right?
Yeah.
And these are what happen. So what Kristen learned was it's not okay for me to be certain ways. I have to be these ways. Right? And then the rest of her life, that seems real.
Yeah.
Like the lid is really there.
Yep.
And you don't want to hit it again.
Yep.
So then you just have this much room to jump. Right? And this is all of us.
Yes.
There are ways in which we are stopping ourselves because of what we think is not possible for us or not okay for us or whatever. Or I did that once, or I was in this relationship once, and then that became a lid.
Yep.
Because of how it went in that thing.
Yes.
What happened was then a story that's how it has to happen. And so now I only jump here so that I don't do any of that again.
Right. I don't want to hit that lid again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
I don't want to
that
feel that
becomes
way
our life.
again.
Yeah. And so for me, one of the powers of getting there is what happened.
Yep.
What happened was I went out with someone who then said they didn't want to go out with me again.
Yep.
That's what happened.
Yep.
She said, I don't think we're a match. That's what happened.
Yeah.
I ate breakfast this morning.
Yep. What'd you eat for breakfast?
I ate cereal.
Yeah. That
Like I
also
always
happened.
do.
Yep.
That happened.
Yep.
All those things happened.
Yep.
Anything else is a story I'm adding onto it.
Exactly.
I'm not worthy. Relationships don't work out. People don't like me. I'm bad for people in relationships. All of that is a fake lid that I'm putting on it.
Yep.
It's a story and meaning that I'm adding. And it's totally human that we do that.
Yeah.
It's just part of what we do.
Yes.
For whatever reason, we learn to
Everybody
make
does
meaning
it.
out of things.
And we do it all the time.
Yeah, and it made a ton of sense like 10,000 years ago when, I'm like, maybe I can eat this. And then I spent the next day puking.
Right.
And so my brain learned to associate like, don't eat plants. Or don't eat that kind of plant.
Yeah.
Because you'll puke.
Right.
So there's a great survival-oriented purpose to us making meaning out of tiny little events.
Yep.
And then governing our lives by whatever happened. Totally makes sense to help us survive when survival depends on eating things that don't make us die.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah.
That's probably where we learned it. I don't know. I'm sure like anthropologists could tell us more about this.
Right.
But that's my interpretation of why it's so great that humans make meaning out of everything that happens.
Yeah. Similar to what we've talked about previously in a different episode around fear.
Yeah.
It
has great survival purposes.
Once upon a time, way back when, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. And if you consider, parent-child dynamics.
Oh, yeah.
There's a reason why so much of our current behavior as adults is governed by tiny things we made up when we were kids. Because, in fact, our survival did depend on our parents.
Yep.
And we got that at some very, very early stage.
Yeah.
That as long as this caregiver or these caregivers are around, I'm going to survive. And if they're not, I'm in deep trouble.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's all kinds of things that our organism was racing to figure out about how do I make sure these people don't leave me so that I can survive.
Yep.
And so it makes total sense that some of our deepest stories,
Yeah.
some of the things that are like our greatest lids on how we can or cannot act,
Yeah.
all got created in that early stage where our survival, in fact, depended on those stories. And it was a gift that we could figure some of those things out and actually act in a way that would allow us to survive for many of us.
Yeah.
So we can appreciate the power of the brilliance of our organism in figuring some of that stuff out. And then we can also see that it's a lid we don't need anymore.
Right.
And it's holding us back.
Yeah.
And there actually are all kinds of other ways we could be to experience life as we want it that aren't tied to survival anymore.
Yeah. At all.
Yeah.
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 It's really nutty. And it was such a huge, that was just a huge thing for me to, like you said, the distinction between this is the thing that happened and this is the story I told myself. This is what I made this mean.
Yeah.
This is a story I told myself around it.
And then it's like freedom from the story, and it's freedom from that person, because part of the story is usually they did this to me, right? But when you can get present to like, oh no, they did a thing.
Yeah.
And maybe that happened. And in the moment there was an impact.
Yeah.
If someone hit you, they hit you.
Right.
That happened.
Yeah.
So it's not to completely absolve people of
Right.
responsibility.
Right.
But it is empowering to actually get that the impact that has had on me, I can own. And I can step out of it, and then you're free from it.
Yeah.
And then they no longer control you. So that's a lot of what people get from Landmark, is that potential to see the story and then actually get freed from it.
Yeah. Did you have a story?
Yeah, so
Or
I had a couple of juicy
stories.
experiences.
Yeah.
Well, and some of that was in that particular distinction of
Yeah.
just what happened
Yeah.
and what's the story I've been living in, and getting them separated. Let's see. One big one for me was that unsurprisingly, I saw some stuff I have with my parents,
Yeah.
and particularly my mother. And one of the things that I got was that I have been resenting her over some things for a long time. And we're in relationship, we talk, but there's just this resentment and kind of wall for me, and resistance to being any more in relationship than we were for years.
Yeah.
Because I was resenting her over certain things in her relationship with my dad. And I, at Landmark, started getting present to, there are things that I've been blaming her for that actually I was doing. So, like, why don't we ever talk about this stuff? She's not open about it.
Yeah.
And the whole time I've been holding that against her. Why doesn't she just talk about it? And what I started to see there was like, oh, I never talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm actually using that
Yeah.
as a way to continue being right about my resentment for her. And I've been using it to make her wrong, and
Yeah.
to make me right,
Yeah.
and to make me good, and to make her bad. And then I get to control her. And I started to see that I was responsible for creating all of that.
Yeah.
And it felt good
Yeah.
to be the right one.
It
And to be
usually
the
does,
good
right?
one.
Yeah.
Boy, that feels juicy. Good. And I started to see there that what I was losing was a real relationship with my mother, where I actually feel supported and supportive. And for better or worse, she's going to be in my life closely as long as we're both alive.
Yeah.
And I just started to see that this whole thing I'm holding on her and being right about and being good about and making her bad about will get in the way of the relationship I want to have with my mother,
Yeah.
of support and love and openness and friendship. And what I really saw was that the thing that I had been holding against her was an excuse to be right about resenting her. I thought that the resentment was coming from the thing. And what I saw in Landmark was, no, I'm using the thing to justify resentment that's already there,
Yeah.
and to be right about my resentment. Because if we don't feel good about resenting others, we have to create a reason to
Right.
be right about resenting them.
Right.
That's big enough
We're
that we
justified.
get to be right about being angry. And that's all fine if we want to live in resentment our whole life.
Right.
And what I got was the opportunity to actually share with her, I'm sorry that I've been resenting you. And it's not actually about the thing. I was just using that as an excuse.
Yeah.
And I'm really sorry. Because even though we've been in relationship and we talk, she has to have felt that. and known that and experienced that and been on the receiving end of someone's resentment for so long, especially a child's.
Yeah.
So that was one big breakthrough I had, was actually seeing it and owning it and talking to her about it, actually apologizing and saying, independent of that whole issue, I'm really sorry that I've been resenting you so much, and being right about it. And then from there, reinventing our relationship and saying what I imagine as a possibility is us actually just, me letting go of the resentment and just loving you as you are, for who you are, and recreating our relationship from there.
Yeah.
And being friends, because we talk a lot anyways, so why not actually really be connected and care and supporting?
Mm-hmm.
So that was one big breakthrough.
Yeah.
Got anything to say about it?
Well, for me, with that story is, and I don't think it'll come to any surprise to our listeners because you've mentioned it before, you have a vision for creating a family of your own. And I just imagine that having that realization and closing that out and recreating something new with your mom has got to shift your vision for your like family a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because I imagine now the way you view her role in your family and her role as a grandparent, I imagine that opens up a lot of exciting possibilities where before maybe you didn't really see that at her, see that as possible.
Yeah, it's such a great point. And I think that definitely that's true for me in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it does and has opened up new possibilities of connection and relationship in a romantic partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gets to some of the power of getting the distinction between what happened and our stories about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is, as we accumulate stories from what happened, right, then it's like someone I am dating is not the person I'm dating.
Right.
I'm dating my mother and every other woman I've ever been in a relationship with, and all of the stories I've accumulated about them
right.
are
and they're
right here.
Exactly. And I mean, and not just, I don't know exactly how I want to say what I want to say, but like every time then you're validating. I mean, you're validating that story that you're living in.
Yeah. Right. You're looking for evidence of it.
Yeah. Exactly.
When we're in the story.
Right.
The only thing we'll see is something that
evidence
proves the story.
Yes.
And so then when somebody acts a certain way,
You're like,
it's like, oh, yep, see?
I knew it.
Yep. And the story gets more and more real until that is just how women are.
Yeah.
And that's just how men are.
Yeah.
That's just how that group is.
That's how relationships
That's how
are.
I am
Mm-hmm.
in relationship or
Yep.
otherwise.
Yep.
Right? And we're only looking for evidence, and it becomes so real that I'm not actually dating that person.
Yeah.
I'm dating a story.
Yeah.
And reacting
you created.
to the story.
Yeah.
Yes, as if it's true, and I know, right?
Right, because
and
you
it's
know.
factual.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, whenever I see evidence, I'm like, yep, I knew
it.
And we're doing
Yeah.
that with other people, but we're also doing it with ourselves.
Yeah.
In ways that can be extraordinarily disempowering.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yep, this is how I am.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is again.
For
I'm
sure.
doing that thing.
I mean, I do that. We just touched on, not on this episode, but a previous or another episode that, like, how do you get things done when you don't want to do them? And I mean, I live in a story very much where it's like, oh, I'm unmotivated. I'm lazy. When it's like, there's a lot of evidence that that's not true. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not the case. But the minute that I decide that, you know what, I'm just going to take a night off and just binge watch something, I don't see that as self-care for myself. I see that as part, like, oh, it's evidence. I'm lazy and I'm unmotivated. I'm never going to make anything of myself. And look, here's evidence of it. I can't even motivate myself to work for, the fifth night in a row. I must be lazy and unmotivated.
That's who I am.
That's who I am.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what's the impact of living in that story?
It's exhausting, and just depleting.
Yeah. And then it's like, I think then the story behind that is there's something seriously wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
No one else
like,
would do
that's
this.
What's in the
So
back.
and so.
It's not
so
like
and so
I am
wouldn't be
lazy
like
and
this.
I love it.
Right.
We could just be like, yes,
Yeah.
I am a lazy person.
And
but
I
no,
love
the
it.
judgment is
Yeah.
there's something really wrong
It's bad.
with me.
I'm
Yeah.
lazy and it's bad. And
Yeah.
therefore I'm bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about that is even when you're living in that story, right? I have all kinds of evidence that that's not Kristen.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually tons of evidence to the contrary.
Yeah.
But when we're living in it, the result is suffering.
Yeah.
And probably not what we want.
Yeah.
And we may be reinforcing it somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how one of our biggest stories is that I'm better or acceptable or whatever if I'm right.
Mm.
And what's so destructive about that story is that we'll be right about our own shittiness.
Yeah. That's the thing. There's no distinction between being right about good things or being right about bad things.
Yeah.
Like your ego doesn't care.
Yep.
It
See,
just wants to
I
be right.
really do have the worst luck in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, good for you being right about
Yeah.
that.
Congratulations.
But like, you're actually reinforcing a
Yeah.
really awful existence by
Mhm.
being right about that.
Yeah.
But that's what we do.
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of cultural lids, right? Those are the kinds of things that do get passed on. Some of it we pick up individually, but a lot of
Yeah.
it's just like, that is the context of the world in which we live,
Mm-hmm.
is you better be right about things.
Yeah.
And so that reinforces all of the stories where we're like, I have to find evidence so that I'm right about that story.
Yeah.
All right, can I share my other story?
Yeah.
Or my other breakthrough?
Yeah. I was going to say, is it a story in the sense that we've been talking about, or is it a...
It's a thing
yeah.
that happened.
Yeah.
And it's a story, but it might have value. It's my other big breakthrough.
Yeah.
Do we have time?
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, maybe let's just pause and check in with listeners. Maybe some things that you guys might be hearing.
Mm-hmm. But should be definitely thinking about.
Yeah. What are the things in your life where something happened and you're living in a real big story from that thing?
Yeah.
And a place to look is what things have happened that still hold a lot of energy for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there might be some like moments that are traumatic, or just, I'll never forget that one time when my spouse did this thing.
Yeah. You just can't quite let it go.
And
or
all they
get
did
over
was
it.
show up late to dinner. But the reason it holds so much charge for you is because you're living in a story about that thing.
Right.
You either created a story then, or it reinforced some prior story that you're then linking them into.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it holds so much emotional charge.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point, is the true story might not be the thing that is holding energy. It might be. It very well could be that thing. But to Matt's point, do a little more exploration to just consider, like, was that the starting point of
that
this
story
for me, or does it go back further?
Yeah.
Like,
And it can be power to get distance from both, right?
Mhm.
So it might just be like, oh, my friend canceled lunch on me. I'm outraged. What actually happened?
right.
They said they were sick.
Right. Yeah. My friend was sick and canceled lunch.
They may or may not be sick, but they said they were sick.
Right.
And my lunch plans changed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened, and I'm furious. Maybe that's a story that's just starting, but it's probably something from way sooner.
Yeah.
So, but getting distance from either of those,
Mm-hmm.
just starting to separate them out. Not to make yourself wrong, but just to get distance from them. The story may still be there.
Yeah.
But if you can separate it from the thing that happened, at least you're not then blaming them anymore for your own reaction.
Right.
Cool. So I hope you guys are looking at that.
Yeah.
And
And maybe-
there's like daily stories we're making.
Oh, yeah.
So there's no limit to the places
No limit.
you can look.
And I would say, if the concept, you're kind of struggling with it, like, how do I know what the thing that happened is? I think one thing I found useful is, like, think about things that actually happened. Like, I'm holding a microphone. That happened. Well, it's happening, but in 10 minutes, it will have happened. I drank coffee this morning. That happened. I took the bus yesterday. That happened. Like, those are the things that happened.
Yeah.
anything after that, that's the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing that gets challenging is that there's stories where like, but that person did that thing and it was really bad and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it may have been.
Yeah.
But you're living in the story of it and it's hurting you now. So you're continuing to hold on to that event as something that shouldn't have been and that should be different and that you're in reaction to.
Mm-hmm.
It's not helping you, even if it's a horrible thing that happened.
Yeah.
So it's like giving yourself the gift of freedom. And we could probably get into some stories, some things people shared in Landmark in Mind that were like beyond tragic and horrible, awful things. But for them to release the lid that had created for them, it's not about that other person.
That's right.
It's about you getting freedom from it so you can live your life the way you want to.
Yeah. Okay.
So, other story?
Breakthrough number 2 for you.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're encouraging us to complete things from our past,
right?
And get in touch with some of these stories and what happened, and then to actually call the people, like our parents, and acknowledge where we've been inauthentic and acknowledge what we had been holding and recreate relationship from there, from a place of responsibility, not from a place of, I've been meaning to be mad at you and I'm finally telling you, you know, but actually just being authentic. It's more just an acknowledgement of like, I haven't been authentic.
Right.
Here's what's actually so, and here's what I'd like to recreate. Mm-hmm. So there's some stories of people getting in touch with exes. And I've got this, I was married and divorced.
Yes.
That's one ex.
Right.
That's pretty complete for me. Lovely person. Sometimes I miss her, but I feel like it's complete. Yeah. And I don't hold a lot of energy around it. I really wish her well. I love her. I care about her. Yeah. And I'm okay that she's not in my life. Mm-hmm. This other ex, sometimes I get really incomplete about. A girlfriend who I dated for a couple of years and then has kind of ignored me ever since we dated, and that just off and on has held a lot of energy for me. Mm-hmm. And I've had this idea for a long time of like, gosh, I wish we could have another conversation and just get resolved, and I don't know exactly what would result from it, if we would be friends after that, or I don't think I would want to be back in a relationship with her, but I've just had this sense of real sadness that it went the way it did and that we're not in relationship. Mm-hmm. And I feel like she resents me a lot, which is hard to be with for me. Yeah. So people are talking about this completion. I'm like, I really want to get in touch with this person and see if we can have an actual conversation. And so I try calling her, and the number's disconnected, and I'm like, did she block me? Which may have happened. Yeah. It's been quite a while since I've tried to reach out to her. So then I try somebody else's phone. I'm like, well, because they're like, don't text, don't message, like get into conversation, actually have like a voice-to-voice conversation. So I'm like, okay, I call from somebody else's phone and it's also disconnected. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe her number changed. I don't know. So I look her up on Facebook, and we're not friends, but we're not blocked. And like, maybe I can call her through Facebook Messenger. So I try to call her, and it's like, you're not friends, so you can't actually call somebody, but we'll let them know you tried.
You're like, sweet.
And I'm like, okay, well. So I don't really know what to do. Should I just message her? How do I actually have a conversation with her without getting too stalky? Right. You know, I'm not going to go track her down. Right.
Sit outside her apartment building.
Yeah, if she even lives there anymore. Like, I'm not going to do that, but I really want to have the conversation. So I'm like, well, maybe I'll call her work number and just leave a message. It's on the weekend. So I look her up on LinkedIn, and like, it doesn't look like she has a job now. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do about that. So I send her a message on LinkedIn, and I'm just like, hey, I'm doing this weekend. Could we have a conversation today? There's some things I want to acknowledge and clear up, and I think it might be a gift to me and a gift to you for us to complete some of that. And eventually I get a response from her that says, oh, by the way, I missed this. She had blocked me on Facebook. Oh, that's why I had to reach out to her on LinkedIn. After she saw that I tried to call her, she blocked me on Facebook. Okay, well, that's a pretty clear indication.
I would say yes.
That she's not interested in talking, but they were like, go be unreasonable. Really try to have the conversation, even if it's somebody that you've been out of touch with for a long time. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, let me be a little bit unreasonable. So I reached out to her on LinkedIn. She responds and says, apparently you didn't get the message when I blocked you on Facebook. I'm not interested in speaking. If you try to contact me again, I'll call the police. Leave me alone. Which for me was like, whoa. I've reached out to her maybe 4 times or 5 times since we broke up 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
This is not the guy that like...
Right. You're not calling her once a week.
Lives.
You're not calling her every other day. Yeah.
If I were going to be that person, I would have been. And I'm so not that person. And in fact, it's scary as hell for me to reach out in any way.
Yeah.
Anyways, the degree of ferocity around it and was shocking. But we'd done all this work.
Yeah.
On what happened and your story.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, okay.
Right. This is the thing that happened.
That's what happened. She said that. I ate breakfast this morning.
Yeah.
She said that.
You guys, this is like a perfect example of like something happening every day. We have things that happen.
Yeah.
Like that's a
and
great
just to provide
example
some context,
of that.
like this is one of the people I felt most close to in my entire life.
Yeah.
And we're not in each other's lives anymore, but like she was the closest person probably that I've ever known.
Yeah.
And felt the closest to. Maybe with my ex-wife, but like to have somebody that you care about that much and that I think about her, I'm like, what is she up to? Like I love her.
Well, and if you hadn't been doing the work, if you hadn't already done the work and weren't right in it, you for sure would have created, and you just decided to reach out to her on your own. Like you for sure would have created a story and lived in that. Like it would have reinforced the story you were already living in.
And there was already so much story there that was like challenging to get out of.
But the fact that you were able, like since you were in doing the work, at least you had that kind of like.
Oh yeah, because if I hadn't been doing that work, getting a message like that.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways it was a gift that it was so severe.
Yeah.
Because it was like, oh man.
Yep.
She is relating to me as a story.
Yeah.
Like. There's clarity, but it's also like this is so beyond who I am. I actually could take it a little less personally because it really felt like she's living in some whoppers. Not just, and it's like that's going to be about me, but that's probably about other
something
people
else too. Yeah.
So, anyways, some of it was like the severity of it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. But it was also kind of devastating.
Yeah.
And so I went to one of the coaches and I was just like, okay, I don't want to make this mean anything about me, but like there's a part of me that if it gets a hold of this will be devastated by this, the abandonment of it and the ferociousness of it and the like, who else in my future will do this to me? There's so much ways that could perpetuate stories. So I go up to one of the leaders of the program and I'm like, okay, I'm trying not to make this mean anything, but here's what happened.
Yeah.
And I don't want to live in a story about it, but I'm kind of freaked out by it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm having a hard time with it. And she's like, okay, well, what happened? Well, I said this. Here's what happened. Here's what she said. Okay. What did you want to tell her? Well, I wanted to tell her these things. And I wanted to say I was sorry. I'm sorry for these things. And I'm sorry that we're completely out of each other's lives. And just kind of sorry for how it all is, and I wish we were in contact. I wish I knew how her life was and we were friends in some way. Yeah. And she's like, okay, tell that to me. So I'm like, okay, well, here's what I have to say. So I shared it, and that was nice. Yeah. You know? And then she said, can I make a reflection? And I was like, yes.
Do you have to?
But I was in a pretty good place to hear it. And I imagined I might hear something pretty direct. And she's like, you're being a drama queen. You're using drama to control other people. And if I were her, I wouldn't want to be with that either. And then she went on to say, like, here's who my husband is for me. Here's the kind of stand he is for me. He holds me to this way. And that's who you really are. And it's time for you to leave the drama behind and just be that person.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, okay. Ouch. I don't know. I was in such a weird space from doing the whole weekend anyways. So I kind of walked away. We had a dinner break. And I was walking to dinner. And it's like, drama. People have said that I'm dramatic, that I get dramatic. And there's definitely like a lot of emotions in here. And there's a lot of sadness and a lot of hurt and a lot of anger. And there's different... And I felt like I've been that way for a very long time where it's like, I just feel so much. Yeah. Whatever. Anger, sadness, hurt, even joy, I guess sometimes, but it's like, you know, I'm like, I am dramatic. Shit. You know? And then I just had this like, oh my God. And I like got it. Because the flavor of drama in that relationship, and especially post-relationship, was you hurt me so bad. and the way that she left and it felt like abandonment, and the way that she ignored me from that point on. And it just felt so hurtful. And what I saw was this organism, like it's not conscious, but it uses hurt to control people. And the moment I saw it, I was like, oh my God, I feel hurt about all these different things. Different people, things have done. They did this thing and that hurt me, and it hurt.
Yeah.
And I hurt, and it is a sensation, an emotion that feels real. But I finally got, like, they didn't hurt me. I learned when I was really little that if I got hurt enough, my mom would stop being mad at me.
Yeah.
That's it. I just learned, like, oh, if I'm hurt and I'm racked and I'm crying in my bedroom, she'll get it. That what she was angry about or been yelling at me about, she would stop.
Yeah.
And usually she would come in and I'm sorry and I love you. And at some point when I was really little, that became how I learned to survive.
Yeah.
And the result of it, sometimes it works and sometimes I need it. And I even saw, like, I do that with myself. When I saw this, I was like, for the last couple of years, when I get really, really down, I finally give myself some love.
Oh.
I'm crying on the floor, and then I'm like, Matt, it's okay. I love you. I'm here, which is wonderful, and I needed that.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that this mechanism of, like, hurt to get love, I'm glad that it existed because I needed it when I needed it.
Right.
But the ultimate, impact of that cycle is that I'm going through life hurt.
Yeah.
And in some cases, really hurt.
Yeah.
And what I saw was that's not their fault. That's how this organism learned to respond and to try to control them.
Yeah.
And the impact on them is that they have to live in the control of that, which sucks for people. I don't want to put that on people. And I started to see in my life around me, my mom sometimes does that. She'll get really hurt when we're in an argument. And I see, like, oh, that's her way of trying to control me. And it's not conscious.
Right.
It's not like people are like, ooh, I'm going to get them with my hurt.
Right.
It's just an automatic survival mechanism, but it sucks to be on the receiving end of that. And for me, I want to be happy.
Right.
This little boy inside doesn't actually want to be hurt.
All the time.
Yeah.
Over
and
everything.
So then I got to tell him, like, oh, dude, you actually don't have to be hurt to get love.
Yeah.
And even, like, within me, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm so hurt by this thing. And I'll be like, hey, that's okay. I love you. You can be hurt if you want, but you don't have to be.
Yeah.
I'll love you happy too.
Yeah.
So if you want to just be happy instead of being hurt, I'll love you there.
Yeah.
I'll love you anywhere, including in joy, which is what I really want.
Yeah.
It was like the biggest, craziest breakthrough I've ever had.
Yeah.
I was like my whole life. And it's so funny. And then I couldn't stop laughing. I was like laughing in this Indian restaurant by myself for like 10 minutes. And I couldn't stop laughing because I was like, it seems so obvious. Babies cry to get what they want.
Yeah.
And they just learn that if I cry, I'll get what I want. And it's like, I never stepped out of that. And then I started saying, whenever I cry, basically, I'm trying to control people.
Yeah.
And it's fine, because sometimes it's like I'm crying with you or in a personal conversation, and it's because I'm afraid, and it's because I want you to love me.
Yeah.
And that's fine. You might feel a little controlled, but it's not doing a lot of harm.
Yeah.
But there's other circumstances where the degree of hurt in that is robbing me of my life.
Yeah.
And I don't want it. So however that all got created, I don't know exactly what voodoo there was at Landmark that created my ability to see that and break out of it. But like the level of joy in my life after that is like a dramatic increase.
Do you feel like it's stuck with you? Because you did the forum a
few months ago.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've been able to kind of like maintain that, or has it been more like now that it's not so fresh?
Yeah.
It's not as extreme,
it's
but
not
you're
as
able
fresh.
to like see it faster.
Exactly. That's the thing. So definitely the mechanism it's pretty ingrained.
Yeah.
So-and-so did this thing, or they left me, or I feel abandoned by somebody, and the response is hurt.
Yeah.
And sometimes it still feels that way, and it stinks. But I'm more aware of it in a way where I can actually love myself out of it. Like, hey, buddy, you don't have to feel this. You can actually be happy right now if you want to.
Right.
And I don't hold it against the other person as much. There's still a little bit of like, you did this to me.
Yeah.
But I'm able to see it a little bit more and step out of controlling people that way and just kind of own that, like, oh, this is how this system learned to respond to events like this.
Yeah.
It's not actually their fault.
Yeah.
And just because somebody doesn't want to go to lunch with me, I don't need to feel hurt.
Yeah.
And that whole cycle.
Yeah.
But every time I share it, So this is another thing about like breakthroughs or things we see like this, where I see a new possibility, and the possibility for me is, and then in relationship, it's like, oh, I could date you and marry you and it could go any way.
Right.
And I don't have to be subject to that hurt process in the same way I was, which is part of what made it seem so scary. Mm-hmm. So once I was out of that system, it was like, oh, I could just be in relationship with you. And maybe you'll do some things and maybe they'll feel hurtful to me.
Right.
But it doesn't control me anymore.
Right.
And so, but it's like every time I reshare the story and the possibility and what I saw with anybody, like I'm sharing it now, it's like, oh yeah.
Reminder.
It's a reminder.
Yeah.
So it's continuing to remind myself by sharing it. Mm-hmm. Here's the possibility I see for my life, that I can be in relationship and not be devastated at some point.
Yeah.
And not have to experience the same level of hurt, or even if I do, not having it control me so much.
Yeah.
So yes, there isn't the same degree. The next day I was like, I am free.
I can do
anything. It was seriously
anything.
like a guy in prison, because my whole life had been dominated by this drama and controlling, and not the experience of being in it was that it was happening to me, and there was, it felt like I'm really being hurt.
Yeah.
But once I saw it, it was like, oh no, I don't have to relate to it that way anymore.
Yeah.
And there was so much freedom from that. And there are times where I feel that, and ups and downs since then, but that was my big breakthrough.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like the two breakthroughs are very like kind of related.
Yeah.
Which is like my other breakthrough, I feel like was also kind of like related, because the other big thing are you feeling good about where you're at with this story? I don't want to
share what you want to share.
So my other big breakthrough was around like asking without consideration. So the idea that we stop ourselves from asking for what we want because we put like what we think are other people's considerations onto what we're about to ask for. So like, for example, I might really want people to like have dinner in my neighborhood, but everybody, lives more downtown, or it's easier for me to just go because I am just me and there's other people involved with like everyone else. And so I'm just not I'll just go downtown. For my friends that listen to the podcast, this isn't a real complaint. I like to go places. But like, so you stop yourself from asking your your friends or whatever to be like, hey, would you guys want to come up here, for brunch this weekend? Because you've put all of these things on them that you don't even know like if they're true.
Yeah.
If you just ask, they might all be like, oh yeah, we never thought of that. We should totally do that.
Yeah.
And so then like you're never asking for what you want, then you start to build up kind of like this potential resentment, like, oh, I always have to go down there. Why don't they come up here? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, did you ever ask them to come up here? No, because you stopped yourself from asking because you think you already know their answer.
It's like another lid.
Yeah. And so for
fleas.
me, listening to you talk about your two breakthroughs, I never really connected these, my two breakthroughs together. But the whole story I was living in around being right, being good, being agreeable, being, the good girl. And then this idea of like asking without consideration. Of course, I never ask for what I want. Because what if it upsets somebody? Mm-hmm. Like, oh, yeah, that's pretty crazy. And so that was my my second big breakthrough was the idea that like, not asking for first of all, asking for what you want is not rude. There's a very nice, polite way to ask for what you want. And two, if you don't ask for what you want, you're denying, whoever, whatever relationship you're not asking for it in, you're denying them the opportunity to say yes.
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing for me too.
Yeah. And what I'm thinking of, it's like, listen to this, dudes or peeps.
Dudettes. Dudes
Folks.
and dudettes.
It's like, where do you think you already know how someone will respond?
Yeah. Yep.
You know? And that's where you're stopping yourself.
Yeah, that's absolutely exactly.
Because we just don't know.
Yeah.
But if we think we know, and we do happen to ask, we'll usually only notice when people respond the way that we thought they would.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that we're reconfirming the story and the evidence of the story.
Oh, see, I was right.
Yep. I ask them once a year.
Yeah.
They said no again, so they'll
Yes.
always say no, and I'm never asking again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because they're on vacation.
So,
Yeah.
friends,
Yes.
potential clients,
Yeah.
listeners, we have an earnest request. Will you subscribe to our podcast?
Yes. Yes. In the effort of practicing asking without consideration,
Yeah.
subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to it right now. I'm earnestly, honestly, genuinely asking, will you please subscribe to our podcast? And if you're feeling especially generous, I would also love for you to rate it.
Oh, yeah. Give it
Yeah.
a nice rating.
Yeah.
Let's ask for a 5.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Will you give
Please
it a
rate it a 5. Please subscribe and rate our podcast with a 5.
Now, here's the gift we can give them, is that if they don't do it, when you're free from what happened and the story, we can give you the gift of, if you say no,
Doesn't mean
we
anything.
cannot make it mean anything.
Yeah.
You know? So
Yep.
you are truly free to do what you want, but we're going to ask because maybe you want to.
Right. And you just keep forgetting.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, yeah, I've been meaning to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Or whatever you're thinking. But it gives you the opportunity to actually respond. And what do they get from subscribing?
Joy
Yeah.
and the opportunity to never miss an episode.
Yeah. They get to listen to the episode when you sing the mystery song.
Oh, also that.
Yeah. There's all kinds of things they might get from subscribing. Similarly, like we might ask, sometimes we mention this, but we each have coaching practices. Kristen has awesome workshops.
I do.
I do one-on-one coaching, and I do workshops within organizations. And we would like you to hire us. We do awesome work.
Yeah.
So will you hire me as your coach?
I will, Matt. No, I'm kidding.
Thanks.
I already did. I've already
Yeah,
hired
she
Matt
did.
before.
But it's
But
like what you're talking about comes up all the time in coaching, because I used
Yes.
to like dance around it more
Yeah.
and just kind of be like, so what
Have
do
you
you
ever
think?
thought about
What do you think
it?
about
Have
coaching?
You thought about doing
Here's what I
coaching
do.
with me?
And now I'll
Yeah.
just say, like, do you want to hire me as your coach?
Yeah.
And it's not even like, I mean, it's kind of a request, but it's more just like giving them the opportunity to
Yeah.
respond to the question.
Well, and I think to your point, the beauty of it, of understanding kind of this idea that we create meaning around everything, but we don't have to. And even if we do, we can recognize that that's what's happening. And so that's the freedom in asking without consideration. It's not just the ask and potentially like living your life exactly how you want it because you're asking for what you want, but it's also that if that person doesn't respond the way that you want them to, it doesn't mean anything about you or your ask.
Yeah.
Like it just means they said no. That's
Yeah.
all it means.
And then you could choose the meaning.
Or that's all that happened.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what happened. I ate breakfast. They said no. Oh.
Yeah. And-
Unless I'm adding meaning.
Right.
In which case it could be devastating or hurtful
Yeah.
or sad or discouraging or whatever.
But I do think, like, to your point about asking people to hire you or asking people to come to one of my boot camps, come to one of my workshops. All the information is on my website. I have stuff coming up in July and August. I know it's valuable, and I would love to see some of your faces there. I mean, I'd love to see all your faces there. But again, the freedom and like, because that's scary to ask people.
Yeah. It's scary.
But if it doesn't,
It's scary as long as we're tied to the story.
exactly.
But even then, the act of pushing up against the story.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, I've got this story that if you say no, I'm shitty.
Yep.
Or I'm a failure or something.
I'm not worthy.
whatever that is.
I don't know what I'm doing. You
so
don't
let me
trust
at least
me.
push up against it and keep pushing up against it until I'm free of it.
Yep.
Until I can learn to make it mean something else, and I can practice making it mean something else. So with some of my clients, I'll actually have them designate a practice of getting no's.
Yeah.
Get 20, any kind.
Yeah.
Anything, but get a no that's not based on your pre-no.
Yeah.
Not asking.
Yeah.
Right. Actually invite them to make a choice.
Exactly.
And get a no, and then learn to be okay with it, however it is.
Yep.
But like you said, we stop ourselves before even getting there because we already have decided how we think they'll act and what it'll mean and all of that.
Well, and do your clients find that it's hard to get those 20 no's?
Oh, yeah.
Because you think you know what somebody's going to say. Oh, they're going to say no.
Yeah, I don't know if
And
anybody's
then they
ever
say
gotten
yes, right? Yeah, because you think like, oh, this will be easy.
Because we stop ourselves so much. Yeah.
Yeah, we think we
will
know
you
the
give me a back
answer.
rub?
Sure.
Yes. See, we don't even know. Normally, I wouldn't ask for that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, not like
maybe you could
20
go around
minutes.
just getting like 20. No, maybe it's 3, right? Whatever. But stuff like that, we
Yeah.
don't ask because we're like, they would probably say no.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe they'll say yes. We'll be thrilled.
Yeah.
Okay. We're
way past.
Maybe we'll split this in half.
Longest
somewhere.
episode ever.
Yeah, but
maybe our first breakthroughs and then our second
Okay, that's
breakthroughs
good.
or something. We'll split it.
Okay, that's good. Well, regardless, let's go over some takeaways that we might have for the audience. You may have already gotten some, but let's see if we can recap some of the things that might be powerful for people to take into their lives.
I would say distinguishing between what happened and the story or the meaning that we've created around the event that happened is a big one.
And getting that we made up the story.
Yeah, and owning.
It didn't mean that.
And the fact that, and I think a big takeaway, because we like to blame ourselves for things, is creating the story and having that event mean something. It's not wrong.
Yeah.
It's not right or wrong.
Right.
It's just human nature to do that.
Yeah.
And so just because this thing happened and you created a story, you creating the story, you can own that you created that story without blaming yourself for doing that.
Right, exactly. It's human.
Yeah.
It's totally human. And then you just look at, it's just the fleas.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense that they would stop jumping past the lid or jumping into the lid every time.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But when that lid's gone, let's actually
Right.
jump past it.
Let's jump up on top of the Empire State Building.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's another place to look. Where have you been stopping yourself based on something that happened before? Where's a place that you want to create something in your work or your business or your relationships or your family where you're assuming only a certain degree of things are possible because of something that happened before? And consider that was just what happened, and that doesn't mean that it'll happen again. Could go any number of ways in the future.
Yep.
Another place to look, I think, is where are you using drama to control other people? And not because it's bad or wrong, but just because of the effect it has on you. That freedom that I feel of oh, my hurt isn't real.
Yeah.
It's just made up. So maybe that's a place for people to look.
And I think that your drama might look different than drama. I think that's something to be aware of. We're both hyper aware of certain words having certain holds on people. So you may think I'm not dramatic, but you might be doing something else to control people. It might not look what you traditionally think of as drama.
Exactly. Well, and
it might be,
I didn't see it as
in a different
controlling
way.
anybody.
Yeah.
And it's not wrong because you're controlling people. It's not wrong, period.
Right.
It's just what is the impact on your life?
Yeah.
And for me, it got to be really clear. This is draining me of my life, and I just don't want that anymore. And then I have to give up being right about what they did, and I have to give up being good about it. But it's worth it because I just want to live and be happy.
Yeah.
And then final takeaway, ask.
Yeah. Ask without consideration.
Without, especially where you think you know.
Yeah.
Lean into that. Surprise yourself. Maybe you don't know how people will respond.
Yeah. Maybe lean in to the idea that you actually don't have any idea how people will respond.
Yeah. And there's only one way to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's power in that, people.
Woo! Yeah. Anything else?
No. Just the usual. So quick reminder, because, it's been at least 5 minutes since we mentioned it. Please subscribe. Please rate us 5. Please hire Matt. Please come to one of my workshops.
Yeah. And hiring me, by the way, just so you know, would look like doing a sample coaching session together. We would actually examine whether there's a fit. So that would be the next step. If somebody wants to work with me, just reach out. Let's set up a sample session. We'll do an hour-long coaching session. And what I've seen is that the people that I work with transform their lives in ways that leave them happier and more full of power and possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I can vouch for that. I'm probably a testimonial on his landing page right now.
Yeah, you're about to be. Thank you.
Okay, so Matt, where can people connect with you?
They can connect with me at my business site. This is hearthstone.com. This is hearthstone.com. Or you can find me on my Facebook and all of that. You can find me. My personal Instagram is Matty Maxwell, Matty Maxwell.
Okay, perfect. You guys can find me on thrivecoachingstudio.com. You can follow me on Instagram at RobinsonKristin, Kristin. Thank you so much for tuning in. Reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Leave us comments. We really want to create a community, you guys. So reach out to us. Tell us what you're digging. Tell us what you're not digging. We do it for us, but we do it for you too.
Mm-hmm. And tell us what song you want Kristin to sing.
Bye, guys.